all my crafty YouTubers, this is Star with H&S Designs Now. Hope y'all are having a great day. And in today's video, we're going to tackle trying to make a ring, a wire woven ring, very similar to this one, slightly different though. This ring right here obviously uses a rose gold wire. We're probably going to make one with a silver wire instead. Similar pattern, similar wrapping, similar stone, but this one is obviously rose gold, and that is a citrine stone. And in today's video, I'm going to be wrapping up a rose quartz, as you can see here. Very, very pretty stone. I don't know the exact measurements. I can look at it real quick. Looks to be a 10 by 5 or 10 by 8, I believe, is what size that is. So any kind of really small stone that you have, I really love to use those really small opals, fire opals, anything, because so many different things look so good with this style that I love it. I do like the calibrated. I know that this was a calibrated stone. This isn't, but it's oval shaped, and it's nice, and it's cabochon shaped, where it's flat on the bottom and round on the top, as you can see. So it works out really, really well for this type of ring. And of course, in this for this project, you will need a base wire. For this, I'm going to be using a 20 gauge. You can also use an 18 gauge. For this ring, I used a 26 gauge, and you can see how kind of chunky it is. It's still a really nice ring, but it looks much better if you use a 26 gauge. You will need a ring mandrel of some type. I finally got me a nice, fully rounded steel ring mandrel, as you can see, and it does have measurements on there, luckily. You will need some type of pliers. These are literally all the pliers that I use for this project. I use my Huron tweezer nose pliers. You can use your regular chain nose pliers, anything like that. You will need your flush cutters, and if you have a small clamp like this, well, these little bitty 3/4 inch clamps, this will come in handy. It's not necessary though, okay? I just find that it helps me a lot to hold these wires, because we're only going to be using 2 base wires, okay? That's all, just 2 base wires. And so that's, you're doing this the whole time. This is going to help you a lot if you have one. If you don't have one and you want to know where to get one, I got these at Home Depot. They were only, I believe, 99 cents a couple of years ago. Hopefully they haven't gone up, but I haven't been there very often, so I don't know for sure. For measuring how long of a piece of wrapped wire you will need, I have this really handy little measurement. What you do is you pop this in there just like you would a zip tie, and it would go around and tell you which size your finger is. Typically, my middle finger is about a size 10. So for this, if I wanted to make a ring for my middle finger, what I would do is I would measure to a size 10, but I only want to wrap the ring shank part, okay, to about a 7. So you want to leave couple of centimeter, maybe 2 worth of space, so that you have an area to make your, I call it a pad, I don't know what you call that, but the place that you put your stone in. You could measure that and get it exact, but as long as you get it pretty well close, it's good enough. But this is what I use to measure how much of a band that I need for my ring. And I believe that's it. I believe that's all that you need. So what we're going to do, I'm going to pause my video real quick. I'm going to kind of get my base wires out, explain that to you, get things moved out of the way, and get started. All right, so I got some of my 20 gauge silver wire out. I did measure exactly 10 inches for both pieces. The length of your base wire that you will need will depend on what size of a ring that you want to make. The larger the ring you want to make, the more wire you will need. Typically, I need 10 inches for at least a size 10 ring. So if you have, say, a size 6 ring, you could possibly go down to about 7 inches and probably be okay with using that amount of wire. Although the more that you make a ring in this style, the more you'll get used to it and the more you'll know exactly how much wire that you'll need. And just for demonstration purposes, I only pulled off a few inches of my 28 gauge base wire just so we can get started and show you what we're going to do. So I do want to go ahead and try to find roughly the middle of my wire, which is right here, pretty close. Now at first I'm not going to be using my clamp, but I will here in just a minute. So you're going to come in with, and these are round, this is round wire too. All of this wire is round wire. The only amount of any other shape wire that I use, which I forgot to mention, is going to be half round wire. I do use a little bit of half round wire for that cushion or for that base for the gemstone to sit on. So I did forget to mention that. I do apologize. But you can probably work around this in some way or another using a little bit more of your wrapping wire if you chose to. This is just how I like to make it. So anyway, going back to your wrapping wire, you want to find somewhere around the middle of your wire. You want to put this side of the tail in between the two pieces. Okay, and I'll get closer so you can see. Coming behind the bottom piece, you want to wrap it around. This is the style that I'm making this in. You don't absolutely have to use this wrapping pattern. You can use whatever you want to. Then come up and behind the top piece and back down in between. So you made one loop on the bottom. Technically you made 2 loops on the bottom, but you only want 1 loop on the bottom and 1 loop on top. Then you want to bring it back around the top and down over both. Up between the two, but under the first one. So making 1 loop, back up and around the top one to go in between. So at first, it'll start looking something about like that. Looks a little messy at first, but you're going to get there. So at this point, we don't have a lot wrapped, but we can go ahead and put our spring clamp on our wire. Make sure you don't get your wrapping wire in there, and butt it right up to the very beginning of where you was wrapping. Make sure you keep this piece of wire out of the way because you're using this tail end of it. Okay, so we just came from between the two and we wrapped the top. We want to come back up, over, and all the way down. Okay, so this is the piece we just did. Now we're going to come back up and over the top, the bottom, and we're going to come back up and over the top, in between the two, push it down really good. And every time I wrap, especially the top wire, I do make a point on the top here to push it down really good with my nail. You could probably even use your pliers as well. And this time, down around both, and then back around the bottom, again around the top and in between. Push it down really well with my nail, and then around both. So that's the basic style of wrap that I've been choosing to use for these rings, and I've been making several here lately for my ring band. So you can see. Try to get you a good up close look. If it will, doesn't really want to. Does not want to. Let's see if we can, there we go. Now you can see that wrap a little bit better. There we go. So you can see how it looks. This would be the front of the band, and this is how the back looks. Okay. All right, I'm going to zoom this out. All right, so now that I've gotten started showing you how to make that portion, I'm going to pause. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap all the rest that I need for whichever size ring I decide to make. And then I'll meet you back here and we'll follow up to the next step. All right, and as you can see, I have the majority of, or all of, my ring band already made. And to show you how I use this as a measurement tool, other than for my own finger, it includes this as the sizing. Okay, so from this point to here is a 1, or from that point to here is an 8. Okay, so that tells me that I have a size 5 ring right here. Well, my finger, my ring finger, holds about an 8.5 or a 9. My middle finger holds a 10. So you can see I've got a little over a centimeter, several millimeters worth of ring left. That's good, because that's what I want. I want to have a little bit of space to hold my stone. So then you can come up and put your stone on it, if you can balance it pretty well, if it wants to. Put it about right there like that. So with my ring and with my stone butted up against the very last edge of where I had wrapped, this stone would come up to make this ring about a 10. Well, I want it just a little bit smaller than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and unwrap just a little bit of this, because actually what I did is I cheated. I pre-wrapped this section of wire so that it was already done, and so we could kind of skip on time just a little bit. And believe it or not, it actually is not going to take very much unwrapping to make this ring the appropriate size that we are going to need. So I'm going to unwrap it to that, leaving the last actual wrap around the full top piece. Okay, so we're going to come back, we're going to see how much we have. It did lose a little bit, and that's okay, because that's going to make the ring just a little bit smaller, and that's what I wanted. So I'm coming through just using my finger. You can also use nylon jaw pliers if you have some. And I'm going to straighten this wire out, because if you see how much of my wrapping wire on this one I have quite a bit left over. Of my wrapping wire, I usually get at least an arm span and a half. I would say that's a minimum of 3 feet, if not possibly even 5 feet. 5 feet might be a bit much, but 3 feet might just be enough, because with this 28 gauge, it takes more to wrap a certain length than it would, say, a 26 gauge. And what I did is I started in the middle, went so far on one side, then went to the other side and went back and forth until I felt that it was about right. So again, this is going to be the outside of my ring band. Let you see that really well. This is going to be the inside of my ring band. So you can see the difference in the way that style looks. So now it's kind of hard to see. There we go. And there's the front again, up close pretty well. I really like how it looks. It's really uniform. It feels really nice and smooth when you run your fingers over it. So if nothing else, it's a good style of wrap or style of weaving. Just kind of play around with and see if you like it. So at this point, what I decided is I was going to make a 9. I think I'm going to go with a 9 on this one, maybe an 8. We'll see how it goes. So I've got my ring mandrel, and I've got to flip this around. I want the back facing me. So I've also got to make sure my wires don't get crossed up. And I'm going to put this, let's see, about right here. Now here is another question for you. Do you want these wires going up and these down, or vice versa. That will also depend on how you want your final ring to look, because I don't think there's too much of a difference actual wrapping wise, but you might change the look of your ring. You never know. So I think for this ring, I'm going to bring my right side up, my left side down. You do not have to do this. You can go the opposite way if you so choose, if you want. But I'm going to bring them side by side. I'm going to pull good and tight so that that is pretty doggone close to being a 9. You can always pull it up just a little bit higher than the size that you want. Pull it tighter, and then that way when it falls down, it should fall down pretty close to the actual size that you want. So from here, we're going to take our mandrel off, set it aside, and we want to get our wrapping wires about out of the way as much as we can, because we will be using them here shortly. At this point, this is when you're going to need your half round wire. You really don't need a whole lot of this, I promise. Just find your end. This is a brand new spool for me, so I've never used this. And literally, that should be about all you need. Just about 3 inches or so. Not much at all. You do want to make sure, run your fingers over it to kind of warm it up, kind of flatten it out. And then you want to make sure that you look at it very closely and make sure which side is flat and which side is domed. This is my flat side. I know you really can't see it, but this is my flat side. So what I'm going to do, I have an itch on my leg, excuse me, is I'm going to take my Giron pliers. I'm going to grip not quite in the middle, but just above the middle, making somewhere around right here being the middle of this piece of wire. And I'm going to bend that wire down. So I still didn't get in the middle, but that's okay because we're going to have some left over. So you want that little gap right there. And before we do that, we want to open that gap, so it kind of looks like a hairpin. And from there, we do want to make sure that our wires, base wires, are sticking out. So you're going to have to pull that one up as well. And then we want to get them as close as we can, so we want to kind of bend them together a little bit because they need to sit parallel to each other, just like that, so that you have a good little base. We're only going to need the space right here that the bare wire is. It's going to be about like that, maybe a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit bigger, but this is the area that we are putting our half round wire on. So similar to my past ring, one of the very first ring tutorials I had made. Nice sharp bend. You can use your finger to press it down. I do like using my pliers though to get that nice and flat, because this is such a small piece of wire. I'm bending it in on itself. If it was a larger piece, I would put a bend in the center of it and push it through that way. But this is a smaller piece, so it's okay. Push it down, make it nice and flat. I do want to keep the ends together. I do want to keep those parallel, just like that. Bend it over, turn it, and flatten that down. And before I get too far, I do want to make sure I push this towards the center of that space. And now that I've got that side pretty well, I'm going to come in, I'm going to tighten that end up because it was the first loop. It was a little bit loose. Can help that. Tighten that up. Push those together again. Put a curve in this side of the wire and push it through. Making sure your wires do not cross. flatten it down, and just keep going until you get this section done. And when I get that done, I'll meet you back here. All right, and so now that I've got the most part of my little seat for my gemstone made, if you look really closely, I do have a small section over here of bare wire and a very small section over there, so I can go ahead from here, even though I did use my pliers to tighten this up as I went. It still sits loose enough that I can pull this tighter and make it an appropriate size that I need to make. And also, you see I still have my tails, so we're going to bend those up. We want a nice sharp bend on these two base wires on either side, and it's going to lock in the size of ring that you're going to be making. So make sure that's pulled really tight. You can go ahead and pull that down to kind of get it out of the way. Again, then turn it, pull this one up. And as you can see, it kind of sprung back on me, and that's okay because I can just push it together with my fingers while I push these two up. And again, like I said, it locks that size into place. And I just want to pull that wire back through because you see it kind of made it a little bit big, made it funky. Pull that there. And I always like to make sure I go through one more time. I like this seat to be fairly flat because otherwise it's going to make your gemstone kind of sit funky. So from here we are done with our half round wire, so we can come in here, lift this up just a smidget, trim it down, flatten that out. And you're done with that side. Lift it up just a smidge. Trim it down. And flatten it. And you got that done. Now, if you do notice also that this very center piece right here of the flat wire is sticking out kind of like a crown for here. That's because I simply didn't go back and I did not tighten up that piece of that section of wire before I continued on. If I were you, if you don't like that look and you don't want it to show, you don't want to take a chance of it, by all means, straighten that up. But for demonstration purposes, I skipped doing that just so that we can see how this goes. Whoops. So we're going to get our gemstone. We're going to put it on. Obviously, it's not going to sit side to side. So it's going to sit more up and down. Okay. And that's actually a pretty good little size space for the width of that stone. So you're probably still sitting there wondering, well, what are we going to do with the rest of our weaving wire? This is when we can come through and we want to push the wire that's coming out on this side to this side once we get all our tools sitting off of it. Same thing with the other side, just so you can go ahead and don't get them mixed up. You do not want to get these mixed up. There we go. And then you want to think about this wire right here is going to come up and around, and this one's going to come up and around. So you want to think about how you're going to wrap your wire. You're going to remember this side of the wire is going to be the outside of your wire that's going to show over your cabochon. Take the tail of your wrapping wire, and you do want to make at least one good, nice, strong wrap around it. And around the outside wire on this side, which will become the inside wire. Okay, at least twice on this one, especially since we're still using our 28 gauge. I do anywhere from 4 to 5 wraps. 4 and then 5, and then I'm going to come 1, 2, getting it tight, but not getting it too tight. And as you can see, my wires also are trying to crisscross, and we don't want that. So you want to get it tight, but you don't want to get it too tight, and you also want to make sure you push it down very well. I'm going to do another 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5, pushing it down good and tight with my nails, and then 1, 2, so you see that the weave is looking like, and then I'll come back through doing another 5. I'm going to continue on with this wrap to about here on both sides of my wire, and then I'll meet you back here so we can finish up getting the stone on our ring. All right, and as you can see, now I have what should be the correct amount of wire to go over my stone when I get it placed. And before I do that, I want to double check my size of my ring and make sure one more time I've got it about right. Right now it's sitting at an 8, okay? But we can extend that a little bit here in just a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and take it off, because I was aiming a slightly bit more for a 9, but an 8 will work, okay? And as you can see, after I got wrapped, I still have a pretty good amount of my weaving wire left on both sides, and I may have to wrap just a little more, hopefully not though. But if you look closely, I do have 7 sections of the 5-2 wrapped up, making sure that this side looks even and nice and neat. So now what we're going to do is very carefully, you're going to take your stone, you're going to hold your finger, hold your ring in it like this, and hold that stone in there. Now, if necessary, you can go in and you can kind of push this out a little bit, giving it just a little bit of room for your stone. If your stone is not quite big, a little bit too big, should I say. And I would say that's about the right size. I typically end up having more overhang of the stone on one side than the other by accident. I never mean to, but it ends up happening. So this is honestly going to be the trickiest part of these rings, where you want to get the stone to sit correctly while you wrap your wires. So what you can do is you can go ahead using your finger and get your wire to go ahead and bend and cross over, leaving a good amount of space for your stone. And just gently doing that right there. And then we push the stone back in. Once I can get it picked up, push it through. Okay, hold it good. And then push your wires down where you want them to sit. You're gonna have to kind of go back and forth with your fingers holding the stone. Pushing the wire out also where you want it to sit. And this one needs to sit out further, about like that. You can also use your pliers to coax your wire to sitting out flat instead of sitting more on the side, kind of like mine are. Also got to get my wires out of the way. That's what happens when you leave a big long tail. But again, we may not be quite finished with our final wrap, so that's why I've left the wire intact as well. Okay, and you see it's going to be slippery. It's gonna move, and that's okay, as long as you don't lose it. I think that's the important part. As long as we don't lose our stones. All right, kind of bending it, getting one side of your wire down, whoops, close. Put our stone back in. Okay. And then you want to get the other side of your wrap as the stone keeps falling out, and it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. It happens to the best of everyone. And you're just gonna kind of fiddle with your wires up here, trying to get them to sit nicely on your stone. Make sure it holds it really well and doesn't slip and fall out. And so, with the way that mine is going, my stone tends to want to sit crooked instead of sitting straight. And one thing that can be done is you lift up gently, very carefully, and you kind of reposition your stone, reposition your wire a bit. Or if you want it to sit crooked, you can do that too. And I'm really kind of thinking that this stone might be a little bit on the big side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually switch my stones real quick and find a smaller stone. All right, so I picked out my new stone, and I'm going with a star garnet. You can see it's quite dark, not a lot of transparency, but it is there. It's a beautiful little like purpley red stone. So I'm just going to carefully turn this the way I need to turn it. Pop my stone in there, and see, that's already, you can already tell that's going to fit much better. Holding it, bending my wires, making sure your wire is also going to sit on top and not beside. So I'm going to have to get this, push it up, get the wire, flatten it how I want it to look. I'm also going to come up right here. There we go. Okay. I'm going to tighten that side down first. Tighten that side down. Whoop. And it's going to, your stone is going to keep trying to pop out until you get it completely secured down. But that's already going to be gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. So I've got it about as good right at the moment as I'm going to have it. Now we want to make sure is, do we have enough wire right here of what we like? So quickly and carefully, I'm going to go ahead and do one more section on both sides of these wires. So I'm actually going to let my stone pop out. I'm going to do one more section on each side, and then we'll come back and we'll finish securing our stone. All right, and I went ahead and I've got one more section on either side. So as you can kind of see, it's going to come down and it should meet the ring band as far as I've gotten it down now. And if it doesn't, I can always just do a few more just extra regular coils on the band, but it should work. So I'm going to come through and I'll make sure one more time, pop it in on this side. Okay, that it's going to come in and it's going to hold this little garnet. And I do believe it will. So what we can do before we get that started real quick is we're going to cut these ends loose. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull it around to where it's coming out of the back side. So this way we've only used 2 pieces of round base wire and 1 piece of our round weaving wire. And you're going to come in, you can pull it around like this and come to where it is, clip it off, put that piece off to the side. And so I'm going to, for the moment, I'm just going to pull this, separate it so that we can get this piece of wire secured down nice and tight. If you don't think you've got enough before you clip it, you can always do some more wraps, whatever you think you may need. And just tighten that up. Nice and tight. It is going to be facing the shank, so it shouldn't be too bad. And again, I'm just going to pull this around, cut it close, about as close as I can. Move that piece off to the side. I had enough left that I could probably do a little project or something with it. And I'm trying to stay on camera for you. I apologize if I get off camera. And just tighten that down really well. All right. Now we're going to gently lift this piece up so that we can get our stone back in. Okay. And set it back down. Now at this point, I've gotten the stone about where I want it. You're going to come in with your centermost piece on either side. Either side you can do first. I'm just doing this one. Okay. And even just doing this one little wrap has already begun to hold the stone. So as I do that, I'm just going to pull it up. I'm not going to do anything with it yet. I'm going to turn my ring around. Again, middlemost wire. Push it through. Okay. Don't pull it too tight yet, because now you want to get it close as you pull it tight. You want to push that wire, this part of the wire, as close to the stone as you can. So now that stone is almost entirely secure. Now here's where you can look behind if you want, and you can adjust your stone, anything like that, because you can always loosen those wires up a little bit and reposition your stone. You can make sure your wrap looks good before you get these done and get it finished. So we're going to go ahead quickly. I'm going to get that pushed up. If you want your wire to come up looking flat, that's a good point to do it. And if you see how this wire crosses your wrapping wire, this is where you want to cut. So you're going to cut about just under where this wrapping wire is. Make sure you use flat side to where the wire is going to stay. I don't mean to keep hitting my tripod. I apologize. You're going to make sure that this end of the wire gets underneath this portion of the wire as well. And if you have to, you can lift that up a little bit and flatten that nice and down. And if you see, it doesn't give you much extra. So this is going to be really close to a size 8. It won't be exactly a size 8, but it will be really doggone close. Flatten that out just a little bit more. Pull it up. And I'm going to clip it. I usually like to try to go ahead and bend my wire a little bit and then flatten it down. So it'll already have that bend to it. Then I'm going to take my next one. You can do either way. I bend it or I just push it through, making sure it gets up against its sister wire. And then if you want, you can go ahead and push this side through. See, since this was longer, I'm pushing it in like that instead of the other way. Go ahead and pull it through and then push it together right up next to it. Okay. And this one is going to be exposed a little bit, but that's also why you want to make sure you use your flat side on that one. Push it down nice and tight. You get your wire where you want it, because it wants to move sometimes. Push it nice and flat down. Okay. And I could see right here, I want to show you these wires crossed. We don't want that. We want this wire to be beside. So simple as just moving it a little bit. Again, flat side right there. Don't really have enough space to bend that wire, so I'm going to go ahead and just flatten it on down. Just like that. And we have our finished ring. About a size 8, won't quite fit on my finger right there. A little too big for that one, but I can still model it. So there is your finished ring. Let's pop it on the ring mandrel. So it's actually a size 7 right now, and I can show you how to make this just a hair bigger and to kind of get the band, because the band could use a little work. Could use a little work. So this is when you take your ring mandrel. You can use your nylon or your rubber hammer, or you can use your metal hammer. I just like using this one. And you're just gonna give it a little bit, not too much, but the more you do to this, the bigger it's gonna make your ring. So I wouldn't do too much but just enough. This is going to harden your wire as well as making it bigger, because if you can see, I know it's really, really hard to see, there's the 8. It was all the way up here, so I've already made it quite a bit bigger. And then it's also strengthening your wire as well. Okay, and you can always take it off, turn it around so that you'll be hitting it from the other direction. And because it's only going to make it bigger so much. There's only so much wire. There's only so much room that it can move. And that got it pretty darn, a little bit closer to an 8, as you can see. It's pretty close. So, and we still have really nice tight stone right there. It still won't fit on my finger, but you know what? It is still gorgeous. Very simple, very elegant, and really easy. In total, this only takes me from start to finish anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, guys, so this is something that you can really do just to kind of get your feet wet with wire weaving and wire work. You only need really you only need two sizes of wire, 3 if you want to go a little bit crazy. You need either a 20 gauge or an 18 gauge as your base wire. You need a 28 gauge is what I prefer to use, or you can use a 26 gauge as I did on this ring. I use a 21 gauge for the little section that my stone sits, and that's all you need. That's all of the wire you need. Then you need a little stone, 8mm, 10mm, something along those lines, a size of a stone. You need your basic tools and a ring mandrel. That's all that you need to make these rings. So it's a good little difference between using the square wire and the flat wire in its entirety, but it still makes a really gorgeous ring, and it's really cute, and it's super comfortable. So you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to my channel. Helps me tremendously. I'm trying to get my subscriber count up, my watch views up, and all that kind of good stuff. If you have not visited my Etsy shop, please go check that out. Lots of good goodies on there. Constantly trying to get new stuff put up, and you know, trying to help support my family. Being a single mom, yeah. But that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you liked it, and y'all have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.